stage or the next topic of our discussion is, I guess you can see the features of Indian economy on the eve of independence. So as I have told the last day that our entire syllabus has been divided into three parts. One is Indian economy's condition before independence, right? Number two, India's economy's condition during the time of independence. And number three, India's economical condition post-independence, that is after independence. So now we are going to study what have happened or what was the features of our Indian economy during the independence era. Now, it was a time of independence, that is 1945, 46, 47. In this particular time span, most of the people, most of those particular national leaders and the national heroes have started giving their almost 100% every each day to make our motherland free from the clutches of the British rule, right? Now, when this colonial rule was been prevailing in our country, when these white settlers were ruling in our country, we used to get some features that we used to find in our Indian economy. What were the features? The first feature was Indian economy was a stagnant economy. Indian economy was a stagnant economy. Once again, I'm telling. What do you understand by the word stagnancy? When I did the first chapter of macroeconomics, there also we went through Great Depression. And in the time of Great Depression, I told in USA there was stagnancy that was prevailing. The meaning of stagnancy actually is a complete low production rate, no further output production, no further capital investment, no further investment in some raw materials. Then the entire production will be in a static state. No further development occurs. This state is known as stagnancy. Now, our Indian economy was also facing the same. When we got independence and when the Britishers have just left us, our India was not having enough amount of resources, as because the Britishers have drained away all the resources from our motherland. That's why we were left out with very less number of resources. As very less number of resources was there, our government lagged behind with some proper amount of investment. Our government was facing different productivity problems, and the fertility level of the soil that we were very famous for once in the time before the time of independence, that particular fertility level of the soil or the productivity of the soil also got reduced due to excessive use of indigo cultivations. That's why we got a stagnant economy during the eve of independence. I guess my words are clear. The first point is clear with you. The second feature of our Indian economy during the eve of independence was our Indian economy was considered during that time as a backward economy. Now, what is backward economy? What do you understand by that? It's very easy to understand. An economy can be an upgraded economy. An economy can be a backdated economy. Our Indian economy was somehow a backdated economy or a backward economy, where no further initiative was undertaken by the government to take up new measures of production. During that time, we were having no such good number of raw materials to start up production. Neither we were having good modern machineries to start up the production. We were still producing every each item with some traditional and primitive methods. That old bullock, that plow, bullock and the plow method of harvesting the crops, of tilling the land was only done during that time. But nowadays, you find our Indian economy to be getting much more modernized, right, Koel? Our entire economy is facing much more modernization nowadays. All the farmers have been joining with high amount of technified agricultural system, which was not there previously. Previously, harvesters, tractors, fertilizers, pesticides were hardly used. Only during the time of independence, we found this backwardness in our Indian agriculture. There was backwardness in the production system in the industries. There was even backwardness in the living standards of the people. Right? So this made our entire economy a backward economy. The third feature of our Indian economy during the eve of independence was agricultural backwardness. Very common thing. Agricultural backwardness is a common feature that we even find in Indian economy if you make a comparative study with the other countries, other developing countries. Agricultural backwardness refers to a type of system in which a country do not follow up modern agricultural practices. During the eve of independence, can you imagine the farmers were what? The poor peasant farmers. They were not having enough amount of capital to raise of their own. They do not have enough amount of money in their wallet to spend for their living. That's why they failed to get enough amount of good fertilizers. They even didn't make sure that they were having pesticides. Neither they were having a good irrigational facilities. At that time, sprinkler, tube well irrigation was hardly in use. They were being used during the time of Green Revolution. So Green Revolution was 1960s, but we are talking about 1947. Just we have what we did, we got the independence. So when we got the independence during that time, our entire agricultural system was not modernized. We were having a backward agricultural structure that made our Indian agriculture a great drawback during that time. After agricultural backwardness, we are getting industrial backwardness. I guess you all know. Industry is the main base of every economy. Either it might be a developed economy or it might be an underdeveloping or developing economy. The main infrastructure remains the same. So as the infrastructure is very much essential for every economy, along with infrastructure, we also need an industrial base for our country. Industrial base helps a country to grow faster and faster. Most of the developed countries throughout the world have been a developed country as because they got some good industrial base. That's why industry is much more required for getting or attaining development. During the eve of independence, our government or our India was not having enough industrial base. The small cottage scale industry, the industry where there was some metallurgical work, was only few in our country, and hardly those small scale industry grew as because those in that time by the that's why That's why our government wanted to invest more and more on the small scale industries when it was there after Green Revolution. So during the eve of independence, our industries did not show up some meritorious effect. It didn't have some positive impact on our economy and it was just growing. So industrial industry during that particular eve of independence was a backward structure. That's what is known as industrial backwardness and is a very important feature of our Indian economy during the eve of independence. And add up with that during that time, I guess you all know that industries are divided into large scale industry, medium scale industry, as well as small scale industry. In the time of independence, large scale industries were very few. They were hardly countable in numbers. Like Tata Iron and Steel Company, TISCO, Tata Iron and Steel Company, TISCO, which is there in Jamshedpur, is that particular industry which was there from the pre-independence era. One question might be there, very important in CBSE and is even given in the NCERT book, that which was the industry that was there as a large-scale industry before independence. So once again, I'm telling, before independence, before 1947, in the time of British colonial rule, Tata Iron and Steel Company, TISCO, was there in our country as a large-scale industry, right? And was growing faster and faster as because iron and steel during the time of British rule was also being exported to other parts of the world. India was as well an exporter of this particular iron and steel, along with an exporter of spices, right? So now, after independence, we got some small scale industries, but those small industries that we got were mostly the cottage and the small scale industries, those handloom industries, some cottage small scale industries in which India was famous for. But they all were having low scale production. We didn't produce bulk amount of output, what we produce now. So we have produced very less amount of output. Small scale production is to take place. Small scale international trade was also going to take place. So poverty was a main characteristics of our Indian economy, as because during the eve of independence, when the Britishers have just left us, making our country an independent country, we were completely downtrodden. We were completely downtrodden with numerous problems like poverty, unemployment, illiteracy. Our country was having plentiful number of negative impacts when the Britishers have just left us. Poverty was an important feature during that time. Misery was there at such an extent that people during that time was not having enough amount of resource to feed their own living. They were not having enough amount of resource. They were not having enough amount of resource even to sustain their life. And as they were not having the resource to sustain their life, the main feature was poverty that was prevailing and that was showing in our Indian economy. The the sixth characteristics of our Indian economy during the eve of independence was poor infrastructure. Poor infrastructure was the next characteristic features of our Indian economy. Infrastructure is the base of every each economy. Infrastructure is the basement of every each economy. An economy is recognized throughout the world as a developing, as a developed, as well as an underdeveloped or poor economy, depending on its infrastructure. If the infrastructure is strong enough, if the infrastructure is healthy enough, if the infrastructure is strong enough, then the country can easily achieve development. The word infrastructure refers to that service sector, that part of every economy which comprises of transportation, communication, banking, schooling. It comprises of the universities, the colleges, the entire education system, as well as the entire medical facilities. These entire comprises the infrastructure of every economy. In our economy, the infrastructure is now much developed in comparison to the time when it was during the eve of independence. During the eve of independence, the situation was not like that. There was a very poor schooling system. That's why the literacy rate was very low. There was a very poor in the health system. That's why the number of diseases and the number of those what I must say, the epidemics was very common in our country. People was not get themselves disease free. Neither they were used to different type of good medical facilities that we are now having. They were neither having a good communication and transportation facilities that have hampered or that have damaged most of the primary as well as secondary sector. The next characteristics is high dependence on import. High dependence on import. I guess you understand that whenever we talk about international trade, we talk about two things. One is export and other is import. Whenever we are doing the macroeconomics, I told that export as well as import are the two great part of our national income. While doing export, you sell your commodities, your surplus output to abroad. When you sell your surplus output to abroad, you do that in an expectation to get what? In an expectation to earn something. So expect this export is done only in an expectation to earn something. So export always goes with earning. But whenever you do import, your willingness or your desire to get some new items trickle up, right? So sometimes, often at times, nowadays even, we are much more busy not in buying the domestically made commodities. I'm not talking about the Swadeshi movement and all, using their own homemade products. I'm not talking about that. Basically during the eve of independence, our entire Indian economy was doing less amount of export. That means we were been producing very less amount and we were exporting very less amount. What we were doing was we were importing more and more items. So when you import more and more items, what happens? You need to pay for your import. Yes.
Yes,
So
sir.
when we will import more and more items, you are going to pay more and more for that. That means there is a drain of wealth. That means there is a drain of money from our economy in abroad. So the next topic or the next characteristics of our Indian economy in the time of independence was urbanization. And the urbanization was not a one that you can find now. Now you can find we are all in urban cities. We have developed a lot. We are trying to move on to the high built cities. We are going on. We are walking in a rat race, and we are trying to achieve the highest peak of development. Right? During the eve of independence, urbanization was just growing. Urbanization was in its primitive stage. Urbanization was in its initial days when our new cities, our new towns were growing in our country. Small states was growing, small new cities were growing, new industries were growing. People was thinking to move from the rural areas and try to settle in the urban areas. But the pace of urbanization was very low, as because urbanization is a main yardstick of development. We can conclude from this story that as urbanization was slow, as urbanization was moving in a very slow pace, people were hardly getting a job, hardly there were industries in our economy, and that's why development was also being achieved in a very slow pace. That's why India has still become what, a developing economy. But now most of the industries, most of the towns and cities are filled with industries. Most of the people throughout the rural areas are traveling there in the urban cities just to get a job, just to settle down and to get a life of urbanized life. As because people do have a, when I say they feel in this in their psychology that urbanization is that particular is that particular mean that can avail them happiness. But
Yeah.
urbanization is not always a mean to get access the happiness, as because if you remain in a rural area, those who remain in a rural area or in a suburban area like me, I live in a suburban area, not in a urban cities and towns, the so-called big metropolis. But still, I'm happy. You also do live in a small town. You're also happy. But people do have a psychology that urbanization and human development always goes hand in hand. Even you can be developed without remaining in urbanized world or even been moving into an urban city.
Hope you'll subscribe my video. If you like my video, please don't forget to share and give your thumbs up. Thank you. Have a very nice day.